Good evening, everyone, and it's our enormous pleasure to have here on Lo Spazio Bianco Mr. Mark Waid. You all know him for writing thousands of superheroes. You name one, and he wrote that. And thank you very much for being here.
No, it's my pleasure. Absolutely.
And this evening, we will talk mainly about Captain America.
And he just turned 80 this year, and no one more than him, not even Superman or Spider-Man, has embodied and addressed the social, political, and cultural changes of the US all over these 8 decades. And at the dawn of these new decades, during a very difficult and hard period for both the USA and the whole world, which role can Captain America and his stories still play nowadays?
I think they can play a couple of roles. I think that they can certainly, in the hands of really good writers like Ta-Nehisi Coates, who's doing it now, is brilliant. It can speak to unity. It can it may perhaps be a tool to get readers of extreme politics on either side, sort of being able to see other points of view and being able to see how radical some of their ideas are versus how we should work together to make progress. I also think that it's a good microscope with which to view the social unrest, the problems that we're having over here, the things that are, America is more fractured and more damaged, I think, right now than I've ever seen in my entire lifetime. And anything that Captain America stories can do, and whether they're allegories or whether they're straight on, stories about actual topical events, putting a spotlight on that stuff is important.
And Cap is a character which is strongly involved on the political field. And how hard is it to move through allegories in order to get the message across without displeasing maybe a part of the audience, or undergoing through censorships or changes of any kind to the stories?
It's almost impossible at this point. It's frustrating in that when I first took on the Captain America's assignment, God, how long ago was that? 25 years? I don't know, whenever it was.
Not a long ago, because if you say a long ago, this means that I'm old. So
exactly.
So a couple of years ago.
Just a few years ago, exactly. Yeah. There was, America was not as polarized. The country was not as polarized and at each other's throats. So it was much easier to envision Captain America as a symbol for one thing that everyone could agree on, or a few core concepts that everyone in America could agree on. And with my second run, same thing. I thought, he's still a character. This is now where I'm, at that point I was writing it in, the early 2000s. And it was, I think that people still respond to basic, concepts of what we believe America to be and what we believe our strengths to be. But with this most recent run, I deliberately steered away from some of that because I tried to get a little bit into it with the first story that Chris Somney and I did, but it was very heavy on allegory. It was because that was very much about how the 1%, the richest people in the world that control the other 99%. But it's very difficult. What has changed, two things have changed. One is that America, as I say, has become far more divided and far more passionately divided. Like the people who may have disagreed on something 20 years ago now just hate each other. And so that's one factor. The other thing that's changed is that Marvel's owned by Disney now. And no one comes down the hall and from Disney and says you have to change everything. It's not like that. But I think that because Disney is such a multinational entertainment corporation, they're very skittish, very nervous about offending people, even people who frankly probably deserve to be offended. So it feels no one's ever said this to me in so many words from Marvel, but it feels to me very much like, we couldn't tackle the same sort of things we did even 20 years ago. It's a very difficult, I don't know how I would write Captain America now. I mean, I did, that short run with Chris Samnee, but still, that was not really about current issues. And Captain America works best, as you say, when he talks about current issues, when he's talking about things that are reflective of American society in the here and now. Years and years ago, when I was writing first, maybe the second run of Captain America, I heard one of the stupidest things an editor ever said to me, which was because I was talking about the same thing. Captain America has to embody American values. We have to talk about what's happening in America. And he said to me, well, Captain America doesn't have to be about Captain America doesn't have to be about America. Spider-Man's not about spiders, which is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Of course, Captain America has to be about America, or else it may as well just be a Hulk story or a Thor story or a Spider-Man story. So I don't know how I would approach that now, because again, you've got to be so sensitive to having, your big corporate masters come down and say, no, you can't say anything definitive. You can't make any sort of, any strong political statement, regardless of, how obviously, acceptable it would be. That's an issue. Ta-Nehisi gets away with it for good reason. I mean, first off, he's a brilliant writer. And secondly, because he is a black man, I think Marvel's willing to give him a little more latitude, because he speaks in a voice that is not typical in American comics. It's not my voice. It's not most white American comic writers' voice, which is great. And I think that's terrific. And so I think that gives him a little more leeway, a little more latitude to be a little more political. But I think at this point, I think that's the exception rather than the rule.
Cap, you wrote Cap several times during his editorial history. The first run in the 90s, then back again in 2000, and now the last run, I hope not last but not the least.
Hopefully not the last, right?
Yeah, with Kristen Lee and Leonardo Romero, which I saw this run as a sort of all-star Captain America that shows the reader, no matter how and when, there will always be someone who will raise his head and rebel against oppression and injustice. Is this your ultimate version of the character? And how did you find Captain America and the world around him change by returning on the series several times?
So that last part we've talked about a little bit already. That how America's changed and how that has changed how I approach the character. But to your other question, yeah, that's very much how I see Captain America. That's the ultimate Captain America in my eyes. And one of the revelations I had with the most recent series that I wrote was realizing what Captain America stands for. We always say American values and this and that, but that's very ephemeral. That means so many different things to so many people now. And I gave it a lot of thought, and I realized that Captain America doesn't stand for the Declaration of Independence. He doesn't stand for the Constitution of the United States. What he stands for is the Bill of Rights. That's what he stands for. These are the rights and privileges of being an American, and that in our best world, when we are at our best, that is what he stands for. And knowing that, it helped me get a better read on who that character could be in the years to come.
And so, thinking about the two characters, so the character and the group, if you have to think about 3 runs or 3 stories for both of the characters that everyone should read, that they defined really the characters, what would them be?
For Cap, I don't think you need to read the Golden Age Simon and Kirby stuff to really understand the character. I think that's just a given. He was a great character. Those in the time that they were published, these were great stories. I'm not sure they hold up as well today because they're very simplistic. That's not to take away from how great they were in the day, but I think that a better read on who Captain America is and what he stands for is probably what Stan and Jack Kirby did when they brought the character back in 1964, when they brought the character back into his own feature in Tales of Suspense comics, which became Captain America. I think the first, the first like 30 or so of those stories leading right up to the Red Skull Cosmic Cube stuff. I think if you were to read just that Tales of Suspense run, at 20 issues, actually 59 through like 80, that tells you so much about that's the foundation of Captain America right there. And from there, I would move on to recommend Steve Englehart's run. Steve wrote Captain America in the early 1970s with more of a political point of view than anyone had ever written him before, culminating in that famous scene where Captain America realizes that the villain of the piece is the president of the United States, who then, kills himself rather than let himself be apprehended by Captain America, which shook Captain America to the core. That's not, he's the president. We're supposed to be better than that. And that set in motion a whole bunch of really good Captain America stories. So that Steve Englehart's run is another. And certainly I would think Ed Brubaker's run. I mean, I think I was one of those who thought that Ed was making a terrible mistake by bringing Bucky back. And I was wrong. I mean, what he was able to achieve with that character, he and Steve Epting, with the Winter Soldier stuff and redefining who Bucky is, it's really strong stuff. So that's my answer for Captain America.
What is your secret of your ability to center the soul of the character in such a perfect way?
And I think that it's sort of a twofold answer. Part of it is humility, like understanding that there's a reason that these characters have lasted 60, 70, 80 years. They were created before I was born, and they will continue to exist after I die. And you don't know why they're that popular to this day. You can have guesses, you can have educated analyses of why Superman exists, 85 years later and is still popular. We can talk about what we think the reasons for the Fantastic Four's ongoing popularity is. But we don't know. We don't know for a fact, because there's no formula to make that work. If we did know what that X factor was that made those characters last and continue, then we would just keep doing it all the time. We'd all be rich, and we'd all be creating characters that are going to last forever. And it's not that simple. So some of that is just bearing that in mind and keeping that in mind when I write these characters, that there are reasons that they have existed. And so try not to break anything if you can help it. Like you said, you can mess around with the status quo a little bit. You can bend and twist a little bit, but you shouldn't break it, because then you don't know if you just broke the thing that makes the character, famous and popular. That's one answer. The other answer is that the way I approach these characters, regardless of who they are, is I spend a lot of time thinking about what it would be like to be living their life, what it would be like to live in their skin around the clock, not just when you're fighting battles, but what is your life like on a daily basis? What is it? How do you perceive the world when you are, Daredevil, or when you are Ben Grimm? How is the world different around you? I mean, with Johnny, I think I was the first to point out that every time he gets angry, or every time he gets more, his temper starts to rise, he actually literally starts to get warmer, which makes sense to me. It's little things like that. Or with Daredevil, specifically with Daredevil, when I was writing that character, who's of course, blind but has radar senses and can perceive things in ways that we can't, there literally wasn't a day that would go by when I wasn't finding myself somewhere, whether it was in the market or at, the gas station or somewhere, where I wouldn't think to myself, I wonder how Matt Murdock would perceive the world around him right now. What would that be? What would he see? What would he be thinking? And you've got to live in that suit. You have to basically put on the suit and live in that world and really think about the superhuman condition. Really think about not who they are when they fight, but just who they are all the time. And I think I enjoy doing that. I love doing that. I think that there's, all of these characters I can find that way to approach them, one way or another. But if there's a secret to what I do, I think that's it.